All right, so we're a quarter of the way through the NFL season. It's been a couple of weeks, so you know what that means. Mock draft timing. Yeah, baby. I will admit, at this point, I would have been hopeful that I would have watched more of these players more often than I have. So any opinions on these guys are still in the very, very early preliminary stages. And some of my rankings of some of these guys, or in terms of where I have them slotted, could be based off of watching them enough to see that I believe in them. Some of it could just be that I got an initial impression off of them, and that's what I thought. So keep that in mind. When I look at this draft class right now, I think one common theme that most everybody agrees is that this year in college football, this quarterback class for the most part has been pretty disappointing. Now, there's still plenty of season left, and a lot of things can change, but a lot of these guys have not been up to the snuff of what maybe people expected. I specifically referenced Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, where you've had some guys I thought have done quite well for themselves, the Mason Rudolphs of the world, and even though he's not quite in my first round in this mock draft, a guy like Luke Falk from Washington State, I don't think Lamar Jackson's done that much to really hurt himself. I think a kid like Christian Thurston from Northwestern has probably helped himself a little bit. That's why you see him going 25 to the Jaguars in this mock draft. Again, still very, very early. Still a lot of things can change. But this quarterback class is one of these situations early on where it was a lot of hype that hasn't been realized. A lot of promise and potential that just isn't manifesting on the football field, and it's surprising. Now, with that said, I still have the Browns at number 1 taking Sam Darnold, in part because based off of early returns from Deshaun Kaiser, you don't see a lot that indicates he can be that guy long term. Now, we still have 3/4 of the season left, and a lot can change, and he might eventually show that. But right now, going off of the here and now, we've got 4 games. We've got enough of a body of work to say, I'm not putting my future job, if I'm in the Browns front office or the Browns coaching staff, on the shoulders of Deshaun Kaiser, because I'll probably be on the unemployment line in another year. It might not matter because you're a Browns front office member, a Browns coach. You've probably been there 2 years. You're probably already getting fired anyways at the end of the year. But from the Browns standpoint, I know a lot of people are going to point to Sam Darnold and his lack of big-time size, his lack of big-time arm, the interceptions that he's thrown and all of that. And those are concerns. But there is still it factor with this guy. He can make some big-time throws. He's got decent mobility. And, interceptions didn't keep Jameis Winston from being drafted number 1 overall, and I think Tampa Bay's ultimately been happy with that pick. I still feel like the safest pick for the Browns if they were to take a quarterback number 1 overall is Sam Darnold. In terms of Josh Rosen, it's going to come down to 3 questions. It's going to come down to mobility, durability, and most importantly, dependability/likability. Not the most mobile guy. Really, he's not. Had some injury problems last year. Can he hold up? And then there's going to be, I think, a big focus and emphasis on Josh Rosen as a leader in the locker room, as a presence in that organization that he's drafted to. Just how he is, his maturity, his leadership, all of those things are going to be questioned. There are going to be some major intangibles questions about Josh Rosen. Now, it only takes one team here, and I have to admit that there's a lot of intriguing possibilities there with him being drafted with a team like the Chargers at number 4, because he stays in LA, has absolutely zero pressure to play right away, and he learns from a guy that is a borderline future Hall of Famer in Phillip Rivers. Not the worst situation to be in. Similar to how Phillip Rivers was once brought in 2004, and he sat behind Drew Brees for 2 years. And Rivers has went on to have a very nice career for himself. So it'd be an interesting situation for a Chargers organization. If you're picking here at the end of the season where you would be right now based off of your 0-4 record, you'd really have to strongly think about a quarterback of the future, because you wonder how much more present you actually have with Phillip Rivers. You got Mason Rudolph going 11 to the Arizona Cardinals. Seems a natural fit. I see similarities with him and Carson Palmer. Whether Bruce Arians is still there as coach remains to be determined. But the Cardinals at some point in time have to draft a young quarterback, don't they? And no, Logan Thomas doesn't count. He should have never counted. But then, like I've talked a little bit about Christian Thurston, I still think Lamar Jackson hasn't done a lot to hurt himself. He could still end up going up draft boards as the process goes along, but he could also drop down as well. Who knows? Again, even with like a Josh Allen, you look at that situation in Pittsburgh. He potentially, if Big Ben didn't retire right away, he'd have some time to develop and learn, which is fine in that case because, again, he would be behind a Hall of Fame quarterback at Big Ben, so it is okay for him to sit. But when he would eventually get his opportunity, he's a guy with a big-time arm, big-time physical talent, and he would step into a situation where he has Antonio Brown outside and Le'Veon Bell in the backfield. That's a really good situation for a young quarterback, learning from a Hall of Famer and playing with these two superstars at the skill positions. So while Josh Allen, if he declared, might not be happy with being taken by the Steelers in terms of the draft position, in terms of situations, not the worst one you could end up in. But with these quarterbacks, it's hard to know because, again, it only takes one team. But you could get some groupthink that is prevalent throughout the NFL that these guys just aren't worth the risk, and you can see several of them drop. I know I've got 6 quarterbacks going here, and that is as much a fan/media think as anything else, thinking that teams are desperate for quarterbacks, so they're automatically going to take one. I don't know that it's realistic that 6 quarterbacks get taken in the first round, but that's what I have happening right now. Especially when, to me, the clear consensus number 1 player in this draft at this point in time is Saquon Barkley from Penn State. Look, I know a lot of people would think I'm crazy because, you can find running backs at different levels of the draft. You don't take them in round 1 because you can find studs in rounds 2 through 7. You can say that about so many other positions in the NFL. Don't give me that crap. If the talent is that good, you take the talent and he's there. If the Cleveland Browns ended up with the number 1 overall pick and they took Saquon Barkley, this would be similar to taking Myles Garrett in this past draft, even though we really haven't seen Myles Garrett on the football field yet. It is ultimately a situation of they are taking arguably the best player in the draft, and I think especially with Saquon Barkley more than Myles Garrett, clearly the best player in the draft. And for so many people that talk about taking best available player regardless of need, regardless of position, how could you knock a team like the Browns or in this particular case the 49ers at number 2 with Carlos Hyde especially entering free agency for taking a kid that is that good and that special? Like, I look at Saquon Barkley right now and I see some similarities to Ezekiel Elliott, but better. If you remember, I was really big on Zeke. I'm even bigger on Barkley. The dude is an absolute stud. But again, we'll see. For the Bears fans, I'm still stuck on Equanemious St. Brown. I know he's not playing in a great offense this year in Notre Dame, but he's a big receiver. He can move. You've seen him, especially last year, with better talent around him with Deshaun Kaiser and so forth. Saw him do some big-time things. I think he's a guy that once you got into the offseason process, into the combine process, you'd maybe want Equanemious St. Brown. Now, you might hesitate and say, well, you've taken him 7th overall. They took Kevin White there, and how'd that work out? And you're absolutely right. But I can tell you this much. Ultimately, the Bears drafted Mitchell Trubisky number 2 overall. If you think you're okay with going into next season without investing several draft picks and free agent money into the skill talent around him at wide receiver especially, and you could argue maybe a little bit on the offensive line, but especially wide receiver, you're crazy. This team should be drafting receivers early and often and maybe going after somebody like Allen Robinson from the Jags in free agency. Now, they need to do something because if they don't, that young quarterback is going to flounder. And at this moment for the Bears, the type of receiver I feel like would fit best for them, a guy would be Equanemious St. Brown. And I think it so far is shaping up to be a decent receiver class. I think it's a decent running back class. It's not quite the running back class of the 2017 draft. This is not nearly the wide receiver class of the 2014 draft. But there are good classes. And to me, so far, based off of what I've seen, this is an offense-heavy draft in round 1. I think the talent leans much more heavily on the offensive side than the defensive side. Now, a few months from now, I might be singing a different tune. But right now, that's the way I feel. And you can let me know how you feel about my mock draft in the comments below.